Today's track and time begins at Concord's Southbridge Boathouse. It's October. The river is shallow, and our guide, Martha Rohan, will see how far she can take her pontoon boat downstream. We slide past broad river meadows on one side, a derelict boathouse hinting at past pleasures, while historic homes keep a cautious eye from a very safe distance on the floodplain. Across the way, a ridge allows for buildings and groomed landscapes closer to the water. No matter where or how, though, Concord's age-old attachment to this gentle river is obvious.
I used to like July when the loosestrife was out, but they don't have the loosestrife anymore. It's one of my favorite. That was beautiful.
That's beautiful.
How crisp it is now in the fall. The spring's nice because you're ready to get back on the river.
Oh, of course.
The summer, sometimes it's not too hot. There's always a breeze out here, so it's always nice when you're at the dock and you're panting. You come out here and it's just beautiful. I don't know, it's nice all year round.
Then there are the handsome stone bridges that cross the water. Over the boat engine's quiet roar, Martha talks about maneuvering a motorboat right over this roadway after the great flood of 2010. She rescued 4 boats that day, carried right off their moorings downstream. In this fall drought, though, Martha's boat had to turn around at Egg Rock, where the Assabet and Sudbury Rivers meet to form the Concord, that wends its way past Billerica Mills to the Merrimack and finally to the sea. In Thoreau's day, the sandbar that stops us in our track was a fording place for loads of hay to cross the river. Martha's memories of this spot include volleyball games across that sandbar, a moment of summertime playing with friends as she grew up. The afternoon was way too beautiful to go ashore, so we headed south instead from the boathouse, past Emerson Hospital, and along the marshy stretch between Route 2 and Sudbury Road. Clearly it was never a very violently flowing river. The banks have not been cut away dramatically, at least not for a number of eons, and we have broad swaths of wet meadow, what used to be hayfield, along the sides. Early in the morning along the river this time of year, you hear the geese moving from their overnight sleeping spot to their breakfast. What we saw later in the day was a great blue heron waiting, catching an unwary frog, and as we returned, solemnly digesting his supper. Martha's stories continued about family who have run the boathouse since 1949. George and Shirley Rohan started renting canoes out of this old Concord Boys' School building. Today, son David runs Concord Canoe Rentals. Martha operates Concord River Cruises and Catering. And Mother Shirley still remains a very active part of the boathouse.
Yeah, I've been on the river my whole life. My nickname was River Rat when I was a kid, so I pretty much know where everything is out here now. And the memories of all the things we did as kids. It kept us out of trouble. My father was always said to us, we always knew where you were and you couldn't get into trouble out on the river. Camped out. We used to water ski up the river and camp out at the Fairhaven Bay on the island, then water ski back down to work. And it was fun water skiing under the bridges.
Ooh.
And then we'd land on the island, and if you didn't get wet, you were a good skier. If you fell, yuck. There was an icebreaker race in the fall.
A what? An icebreaker?
It was called the icebreaker race. It was a canoe race from Sudbury Road down to Monument Street. And anything that you could paddle to be in the race. And they had war canoes, they had inner tubes, they had anything. And it was just hundreds of people on the river. It was like mass confusion. It was fun. They gave out trophies at the end.
I can't imagine a better way to spend a beautiful fall afternoon. Exploring the Sudbury is not complete without a trip upstream to Fairhaven Bay. There are many ways to get there. Kayak, of course. Classic skiff. Party boat. We picked canoe with a barely humming trolling motor. Late in the day in the fall, the river comes into its own. The trees by Fairhaven Hill catch the last light of the sun setting in the west. There's a bird, there's a last kayaker. There's the sound of voices across the river where someone is taking a different track through time, and the color calls to you. Drought or high water, this is a river that is always beautiful. And every day it changes and invites you to join in the experience. Farther upstream, the Sudbury looks like an entirely different river, both on its banks and along the river itself. The houses along the side are modern, mid-century, part of the neighborhood of Canantum, built in the first years of the 1950s. It's an experiment in neighborhood living. The colors already past their prime lower down on the river are at their peak here, an indication of its cooler and shadier pine and oak forest. And even the landings and the lawns stretching down to the river are more subtle than in town. Martha's Point is a wonderful anomaly on this river, a glacial blip of hard rock that resisted the force of water and ice and snow pushing downstream and carving out a wide swath of land elsewhere along the river. Soon after Martha's Point, the river starts to broaden out again. The buttonbush marks more wetland on both sides of it. And there's a strong breeze coming towards us, signaling our approach to Fairhaven Bay. The Sudbury is not known for its current, nor its falls. The closest it came in the olden days to industry upstream were tanneries, but that was enough to add heavy metals to the river. And because it flows slowly, it's hard to flush those metals out. Signs by bridges warn fishermen to catch and release. As the river opens out again, we begin to catch glimpses of more modern but still as impressive homes as are farther downstream. This is one of the coveted places to live on this river. A floating dock signals the water approach to this extraordinary modern house. And more subtle but equally impressive are other houses tucked in among the rioting colors. All along this bank, especially the one by Fairhaven Hill, are trails which, if you take long enough, follow far enough, will lead you to Walden, will lead you to Mount Misery and Lincoln. It's a wonderful network to explore. And here, alongside one of them, is a small stone boathouse, decrepit for years. It belonged to the estate that is located back in the pine trees where you can't see it, but is on property that more recently was acquired by the Concord Land Trust and is part of a vast amount of acreage in this area that has been permanently protected and open to visitors like us for passive recreation. 2 years ago, this wonderful stone boathouse was restored by the trust. It reminds us of all the waterborne activity that has left tracks in time. There's a lot of ice fishing that goes on Fairhaven Bay when the climate is right. There's our heron, over by what Martha called Party Island. There's a lot more river upstream on the Sudbury River. If you keep on going up that direction, you'll go under Lee's Bridge, which separates Concord from Lincoln at 9 Acre Corners. You'll end up in the National Wildlife Refuge, part of the Great Meadows that's in Sudbury. But this is far enough for us for one trip. And we'll leave the heron in peace.